Good morning, everyone. How we doing? All right. So, before we get started, I need y'all to help me out with something. We're going to do a little bit of audience participation. Now, we're going to do sort of a modified version of the wave. This is not one you're going to stand up, but I want you to start from the left side, or to my right, your guys' left. Go ahead and put your hands up as I move across. Just see if we got some energy going. On the count of three, we're going to get started. 1, 2, and 3. That is so pretty. Well done, everyone. All right. So, my name is Shane Tilton. I'm an associate professor at Ohio Northern University in Ada, Ohio, and I'm on the advisory board for Geek Therapeutics. It's my pleasure to welcome y'all to Mining the Underdark, Therapy and Roleplaying. Before doing a formal introduction of myself, I want to give the chance for my panelists, my phenomenal panelists, to introduce themselves. Let's start to the gentleman to my right, Dr. Anthony Bean. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Anthony Bean. I'm the leader of Geek Therapeutics, and we do a lot of training in anime, video games, D&D, RPGs, comics, bunch of merch, bunch of everything. We're pretty much all geeks, and we do a bunch of trainings in therapeutically applied geekdom. And if you are a geek in one area, we can use it in a therapeutic manner. And so we're APA, NBCC, ACE, and now Association of Play Therapy approved for professionals to come on in and get trained.
Okay. Daniel, or Dr. Gamology.
I'm Dr. Gamology. My real name is Dr. Daniel Kaufman. I'm an assistant professor at Grand Canyon University, and I own Area of Effect Counseling. And I stream on Twitch. Currently, I'm playing through Final Fantasy XIV. I'm always trying to identify moments from either the story of the game or the activities that I'm part of in the game to create mental health moments and take messages or things that I can imagine talking with my clients about, but saying the game is what got me thinking about this. And so I'm always searching for the positive elements of the psychology of playing games. I'm also the host of the Gaming Persona podcast, where every week me and my partner Jenny will talk about who we become when we play games. And whether it's research articles that have just been published or different games we played, we're always trying to connect our hero's journey with different concepts from the field of psychology.
Hi, I'm Adam Hill. I am a family-based therapist and certified geek therapeutic game master through Geek Therapeutics, but I believe that we can definitely create good stories and places for people to learn and meet them at their level. And that is something that's so great about everybody's passion for incorporating role-playing in therapy. We can get talking and we can start making some actual change with people in ways that they want to do it.
And Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Adanacio. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in the states of California and New York. I have a private practice in New York City, in Manhattan and Queens, and I'm also on the board of Geek Therapeutics. I incorporate all sorts of aspects of geek subculture into my therapy practice, and currently I'm trying to kill all of these guys. Your character.
It's hard, it really is hard. So 2 more people I'd like to introduce. Danny Hang, who is not here. He is with us in spirit and on a phone. And I would like to recognize one of our early members of our group, Maria, who is one of the players that we had for early on in our game set. So once again, my name is Shane Tilton. I hold a doctorate of philosophy in the individual interesting program of modern media and information studies from Ohio University. I am the incoming chair of the Game Studies Interest Division of NCA, National Communication Association, and I've written a book called Meme Life, which is coming out next month as an ebook, an audiobook, and a paperback to all the stores you buy such goods. There's some cards that I have with me. If you'd like to see that later on, that's fine. But before we get there, and finally we will be talking about the campaign that we'll be doing. But as someone that has not played D&D before this point since the year of our Lord 1986, I will say that's been a very unusual experience, and I wanted to share my experience with you all. So, with the introductions out of the way, let's get to know a little more about these brave souls that are before us today. With the first question, what is your favorite memory in role-playing?
Of Shane not healing me each and every time.
Okay, so you're gonna have to get used to this early on. I'm a bard, and apparently I've been co-opted as a healer. And anytime that I don't heal anyone, I hear about it for 2 weeks. So just get used to it and just enjoy my pain. So Tony, continue, please.
We're up to 16 times, everyone, just so we're clear. Joe has almost killed me about 4 times, and I Goomba stopped someone last time, so I'm happy with that.
Okay. Daniel.
We were supposed to be rescuing Adam in the hold of a ship, and I decided as a wizard that the best way to kill the person guarding his cage was to blow up the stack of boxes that he was standing by, and it worked. The rest of our party, though, was in a battle up on the deck, and so they now are dealing with the spreading fire, and that created some interesting transformations for my character, and so now I'm always trying to set things on fire. So now I'm a pyromaniac therapist playing a wizard in D&D.
His first question in every scene that we do is, what's flammable?
Yep.
It doesn't explode, Joe.
Adam.
Honestly, my favorite memory was the first couple sessions we did when we were escaping the Belgian Belt, and we were on the run and being chased by the drow huntress Ivara Maelstrom, and we were, jumping out off of a prison tower into spider webs and then into a river, and we really got to know our characters in that moment, and it was such a good and defining way to open up this interaction and interplay between everyone.
Okay. Joe, anything for games?
Yeah, for these sessions that we've played, I think some of my favorite moments are from how you all interact within your dreams. I do this thing where during short or long rests, and any of the players go to sleep, we sort of explore their backstories as they dream, why they are dreaming so heavily about their past lives or their backstories is still up for question, but how they respond and how they interact for me with their backstories is actually a large part of therapeutic process that I often integrate into my D&D or role-playing game sessions, even in my private practice. So, other than that, though, I think just in general, my favorite moments of role-playing are just when I'm playing with my son, a much more child-friendly version of this game. He's 7, so anytime I play with him, it's a favorite moment.
And I'm glad y'all picked basically from our campaign. I was kind of posing this more generally because I love playing with y'all, I really do, but I remember the first time I did role-playing was in like 4th grade, and playing with my friends 4th grade and trying to explain to my parents what I was doing in someone's basement for 2 hours with no supervision. So it was it's wonderful how we're talking about the different components that we feel draws us into the game. Which actually, since y'all are talking about it, let's actually explain what we're talking about. So what is the Underdark? Joe, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind sharing with our wonderful new friends what the Underdark is?
I mean, Adam's got the best picture here. I'm not gonna lie.
I think it's because I rolled a 12 for my initiative, and everybody else rolled like a 7 and an 11, and so
We're
I'm just like,
away.
oh no.
So the game that we're playing together takes place in the Underdark, which is a setting of, in Dungeons and Dragons. It's a network of vast caverns and winding tunnels under the surface world that essentially is its own, it's as large as the surface world. I guess Hollow Earth theory, right?
Yeah.
And it's home to all sorts of strange monsters and creatures that haven't seen the light of day, as well as really well-established societies and cultures of various different, creatures and races of the D&D world that have found themselves just better off in the places where there are no light. So that is the Underdark, but specifically, I think the Underdark is also, from a therapeutic standpoint, a test of resolve, of exploration, a test of teamwork and communication, because you need all of those things in order to survive the Underdark. So.
And from the player's perspective, what do y'all think the Underdark is? Or what is your perception of the Underdark after playing it nearly a year going through this campaign?
So it's just not actively trying to kill us all the time. Yeah, I believe that the Underdark is like a really good invasive based metaphor for just the explorative process of self-development. I still don't know what you want me to tackle though, Joe. I'm really working on it, trying to get everybody to the end. But maybe that's just me as a person, right? Maybe I want to see.
I think I'm trying to see in myself, what do I do when I'm being ineffective? I think the Underdark is a really terrifying mirror for that question, because I'll have these really great ideas, and if Joe wants that idea to happen, usually I'll roll somewhere that's pretty mediocre, but something will happen. But some of my best ideas end up going nowhere because I tend to roll terribly. My relationship with the RNG gods is a terrible one. So the Underdark is just constantly reminding me of what I can't do and then challenging me to keep trying to figure it out.
I think we're all dead and we're just trying to escape the underworld. So that's my theory on what we're doing. That's what we're dreaming is our past selves and some of the last things that we were doing before we were taken randomly and put into this dungeon-esque world where we're seeing moments of our past and reliving them, and we're going to have to try to piece them together to make sense of why we potentially perished.
And I still think
No ideas, Joe.
See,
It's a sixth sense.
I like the idea of the grit, because essentially it's a way that we're trying to do more than what we would normally do. And even in our characters, in the real version of the characters where we got into the Underdark, that's something I think it feels like we're pushing ourselves beyond what we can normally do. So, Tony kind of alluded to this, but let's say, for the sake of argument, that we were kind of signing up for this mission. So, to the panelists, why did you sign up for this? Either talk about actually signing up doing a regular campaign every 2 weeks, or why you thought your character would sign up to do this exploration. You take the question either way.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I think there's at least 2 or 3 reasons why specifically I asked you all to be a part of this. Firstly, I just think playing with other clinicians helps me as a therapist get certain ideas and just gets my thoughts flowing as to what I can continue to incorporate into my own private practice when I'm, playing with clients. I have groups both for adolescents and teens as well as adults that I do. And playing with a whole bunch of therapists helps me get some, clinical feedback about how I'm running a game, but also they bring to the table a whole bunch of ideas and aspects that I think could work in a clinical setting. Specifically, I chose this module that we're playing, which I guess is, it's like a homebrewed version of the Dungeons & Dragons module, Out of the Abyss. And I chose this one specifically for 2 reasons. One, because I do believe it is the most difficult published module for DM to run for many, many different reasons. Everything from a mass amount of NPCs that I have to work in my mind, to a whole structure change, a transition from the first half of the adventure to the second half of the book, where I have to actually make it convincing for the players to feel like this transition is natural and normal. You guys haven't even gotten there yet. I think also the way this campaign is structured is for the DM running it is very much like the Underdark. It's very confusing in some places on how you want your players to navigate through these dark, winding tunnels when the book doesn't really have any maps, and so much of their engagement with the environment depends on where they are, the size of the tunnels or the caverns or the structure of the cities that they're in. So it was a personal challenge to pick this mission, but the final reason I picked it, I think, is because the subtle themes of this adventure are very traumatic, and it's a very gritty, dark adventure. And you guys are sort of like my test subjects on how to integrate a almost semi-trauma narrative into therapy practice. Because one of the things that you always want to be aware of when working with trauma and clients, of course, is the fine line between doing processing and work with them, but then also not triggering trauma as well. And so that is also why I sort of picked this mission.
Questions open up?
Well, absolutely. Joe, I know that there was an excellent panel earlier this weekend about consent and gaming, and starting with a good session 0 to make sure that we're all on the same page about what things are allowed and what things aren't. In some cases, clients may never want to broach a particular topic in a role-playing therapeutic session. I mean, let's be honest. Some people want to have a good fantasy and work on things, but not have to be reminded of certain things that might get them upset. And so, with that, I mean, a lot of our stuff has been on the table, and it has been a really illuminating experience trying to work with this kind of fictional character and help them grow, and in turn trying to work on things in your own interpersonal life. Like, honestly, I think I'm like, for 2 weeks, I will sit there and I will ponder and I say, what did Joe mean by this? Why? And so, but I think that's what you want. You want me to be like, okay, am I doing things right? Am I a good hero? And we all want to be the heroes of our own narrative. And that's the whole reason we tell stories, is to have heroes and teach lessons.
Man, that's where you go with it. I go with it with how can I try to undermine Joe each and every time. And I always try to think of what is he trying to plan and everything, and then I do the opposite. Such as when we Goomba stopped our last session, I climbed up on top of a thing 30 feet up, and he's like, you still have an action? I'm like, cool, I'm gonna jump on this thing, and we critted fall damage on it, and then I pounded it and killed it. We did like 49 points of damage in one run, and you're like, and that's pretty much my path in this, I feel. Because I didn't get to create my character, my wife did. And I stepped away from the computer for like 5 minutes, and I come back and my character's created. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that was the best part. Tony planned this amazing, like tanky character.
One, like super high AC and everything, and I come back and I'm a monk kitty.
I actually feel like it's really fitting that I'm sitting in between these two, because this is my first D&D game ever, and I have been wanting to play because I have been a counselor for over the last 10 years, and I see all these opportunities to use D&D as a group therapy opportunity to help people grow in different areas, and you have to know how to play, I think, and then you have to know how to run a game as well. And so I came in for our session 0, and I created a wizard because I loved being a wizard or a magic caster in any kind of game that I play. And I thought I was going to have an amazing hat and actual robes. We're in the Underdark. I ended up naked, and my first staff was a spider that I found and enchanted, and it died a couple sessions later. So I had to pull a giant spider's leg off and turn that into my staff, which I used. It turned me evil, I guess. Everyone was warning me not to be evil for months.
Evil-ish.
Evil-ish. And then I hear we became murder hobos at some point. So, Adam for me shows me what it looks like to be a person that keeps track of the lore, and Tony shows me what it's like to just be a 24/7 troll. And I'm trying to decide what I want to be, and I have all these different examples, and also Shane, playing his character, Silnan, is much more benevolent in terms of the only healing utility we seem to have most of the time. So
When he chooses to use it.
Exactly, when he chooses to use it. Although I've had a pretty nice run. It turns out when you're nice to people, they heal you more.
When you're nice to
That's
people, they
right.
heal you. Let me write that down. When they're nice to people, they heal you more. Good.
So I decided to play because the pandemic was starting and my job took me out of the classroom, and I've always been doing a lot of stuff online anyway, but I decided I needed friends, and yeah, I gotta stay home, so every other Friday works, and I can finally play D&D. So we're still going, and I think that's really awesome.
I guess the reason that I did this was because I'm kind of piggybacking off of what Daniel was talking about. As someone that teaches, I had a lot of, anxiety and stress because we were doing this transition from tradition. How many are college students or in education? Give me a thumbs up if you're in college or education, thumbs down. So the transition from in-person classes to online and doing the back and forth was a very anxious component. And when Tony and Joe pitched this idea, I'm like, okay, this is a great way to kind of alleviate stress or maybe alleviate some of the components that the anxieties I was feeling with, even though much like playing Dark Souls to deal with stress after a dissertation, this is probably a little bit more extreme. But it kind of gets us to the next question, because one of the things that I tell my friends and colleagues as part of playing D&D or playing role-playing is that we're basically approaching it from a therapeutic role-playing angle. So one of the things I like are definitions, or good definitions. So how do you define this term? Because we've talked about it before kind of informally as a group, but what's a good way to frame therapeutic role-playing?
Yeah. So I'm of the mindset that in many ways, any type of role playing is therapeutic in itself. In fact, it's almost built into the definition. And that just doesn't come into games. I think role playing in many different environments actually can be therapeutic, whether it's role-playing in a classroom, in a presentation, whether it's role-playing actually just in the clinical setting. There's various different therapeutic techniques that involve role-playing that have nothing to do with role-playing games, like Gestalt, what we call empty chair technique, or top dog, underdog technique. These are therapeutic sort of interventions that include role-playing.
Can you talk about the underdog technique a little bit? Can you give like a 30-second descriptor of what the underdog technique is?
Yeah, like top dog, underdog? Yeah. So top dog, underdog is where a client will basically have a conversation with themselves, except they're embodying two different selves. Their top dog self and then the underdog self. And the conversation that they have back and forth between each other, which sounds a little bit silly, and I always like preface when I'm working with a client, like, hey, you want to try something silly? Because it is silly. But they'll talk to themselves through these two roles, and in the conversation, they discover something about themselves, because the truth of the matter is, those top dog and underdog selves, it's all part of who they are. We have many different parts of who we are that make up our whole self. And so exploring these two parts of the self and the conversation that you can have between them can be therapeutically revealing. Empty chair technique is a little bit similar, but it doesn't have to be yourself. You're sitting in a chair and you're talking to an empty chair as if someone else is there. And sometimes I might even have a client get up and sit in that chair, the other chair, to embody the role of whoever they'd be talking to. But role play, look, even for any sex therapists out there, role play in the bedroom too can be therapeutic. So any type of role play, I think innately has some therapy value into it. If we're talking about clinically therapeutic role playing, I would say clinically therapeutic role play is probably role play done in a clinical setting that has the purpose of either working on a specific clinical goal that relates to a clinical issue, or the emotional reflection that one can get out of role-playing and the building of awareness of oneself and their emotions. So that's how I think I define clinical therapeutic role-playing.
Well, in all honesty, I think that therapeutic role-playing, like Joe said, can be in any form. As long as, you know, it's assuming the role of something else, putting yourself in a different mindset is sort of one of the cornerstones of empathy. And doing that and truly understanding where another person's coming from is what makes role-playing feel so good to us sometimes. We're able to embody these avatars that have virtues that are far better than our own, or even vices. And the thing is that it is an environment in which those can be expressed. And it is truly, like Daniel said, a mirror to ourselves. As for, you know, I know we have a picture of Matt Mercer up there, Critical Role, awesome stuff, but the simple fact is D&D doesn't have to be the only session. He started with Pathfinder, Matt Mercer himself, and that is where you can draw inspiration from. And maybe your friends want to play, you know, anything, Eclipse Phase, or Warhammer, or some other systems. I'm sure everybody has their own personal favorites. And that can just be, in a way, just as therapeutic as any you know, D&D. Pick your system, pick your stories that you tell in that system, and then we can kind of start working on what therapy is.
One of the things I really enjoy doing with my clients is a life balance wheel. And we'll do this early in treatment and then throughout. And what I will do is I'll cap their number of points that they can put on the wheel. And then they'll have 8 categories or 12, depending on which wheel I'm using. And so the idea is you cannot max out all these categories. You need to show me who you are based on where you put your points. What you value doing throughout your day, what's important to your personality, how you interface with others. So if you give yourself a 10 out of 10 in an area like romance and intimate relationships, then something somewhere on your wheel has a 4 out of 10 because you have taken the average and you borrowed points from one area to put into that one. That tells me a lot about my client. That's a choice, and that's also their character sheet now. And as we work through therapy, we may need to update that character sheet. They may earn more points because the argument is, I really have gotten better at this and I'm not borrowing anymore. That's one area, but the one that I'm actually most interested in sharing with you is the importance of creativity and imagination in order for us to have positive mental health experiences. The world creates such an emphasis in education and also other structures of how we connect with our reality, creates such a concrete idea of what success is and what being good is. And there are rules that we all probably should follow, but my wizard is chaotic good. And so I get to be in this space where I may follow the letter of the law more often up here and just be grumpy about it inside, but in D&D I can burn it down. And that is a good moment of catharsis for me when I line up all the enemies and do a conal or an AoE and it kills 4 of them. I love that joke whenever the battle is able to be constructed that way. But also, I really do believe that somewhere in our being we are luminous, that, you know, my physical body is sitting at this table right now with a microphone talking to all of you, but because I practice imagination and because I practice what my mind is, if I close my eyes and really just think about a different place, I could meditate. It might be more complex, difficult to achieve in front of so many people watching. But the role play idea is it's an opportunity to just help my mind become more flexible and to be in a different space. And I think if we can pass that on to our clients and they can find their different spaces, whether it be to meditate or to enter a relaxation mode, they probably won't imagine they're in the Underdark. And hopefully none of them have the trauma of thinking they're going to be this nice robed wizard who's naked with a spider wand. But I think that I would never trade that first experience, though, because I might actually have a session 0 where I get to keep my stuff next time.
Not with Joe.
Okay, maybe with Adam then. I think that therapeutic role-playing what I'm trying to pass on to everyone is that we can imagine things and be things because of what our mind is capable of, but you have to practice it, and you won't be able to find the permission to feel better about this or that just through behavioral changes all the time. I think our mind is that extra multiplier on certain things that we hope to get in life. And games like D&D or other role-playing opportunities give us the ability to imagine what that would look like better than some of the more boring ways to think about what a solution is.
I'll echo everything that they said up here as well, with the additional caveat that it has to be intentional behind the play. Us as adults, it's driven out of us consistently, all the time. Go to work, sit at a desk, type on a computer. Where's the fun? And I think with our adult clients and our teenager clients and a whole bunch of other different areas, is there has to be intention behind the play to a degree, but there also has to be the room for them to expand and see where they go. When we do therapeutic role-playing in D&D, RPGs, one-on-one, do a play, personal sessions with our people, and even decompression sessions individually with the groups, we definitely have to have an idea of where has your character taken you, where is this can be projected upon your real life on some level, and how can we take what your character's learned and also integrate that into where you are at in some sort of facet. And I think that's a big part of what we do, and it's that intentional streak of having to have that play is important in what we do. And I would say the teenagers and the adults, they love it because they haven't been able to play like this for years, and to have a space for them to grow and to continue to grow in different ways, or have teenagers project upon a different gender because they're questioning it is very, very important, and this is what this allows us to do.
One of the things I love about being with these wonderful people is sometimes they're so smart that they basically move ahead and they think through carefully the definitions, because essentially the next two questions they've already answered. So I'm going to call an audible. And as clinicians, so the question was, guys, is how do you apply role-playing techniques during therapeutic session? Can we get a thumbs up if you feel that they answered that question already? Thumbs down if not. Okay, so I'm going to call an audible. So as therapists, what are things that you look at your clients in terms of their role play? What are you doing to see if they are applying good mental health practices? Mm-hmm. So from the therapeutic, how are you assessing good role playing in your clients?
Yeah, so part of, I think, playing a lot of the tabletop role-playing games, I believe there's some intrinsic therapeutic value built into them, as well as some aspects of like intrinsic value that I can throw in as a clinical therapist. And in both ways, part of this is just observing. A lot of this is observing instead of forcefully guiding the clients, because I think the way narrative therapy within the role-playing game is set up is it's going to bring out naturally some therapeutic benefits that the clients will take, and then it's up to me to observe it and then reflect it and comment on it so that they become aware of what they just did. I would honestly, I'm in the mindset of I'm mostly what we call person-centered therapist, and when it comes to therapy and therapeutic growth, I think the number one greatest benefit to growth is awareness. Oftentimes we just go around life without being even aware of our choices, our decisions. We're reactive, we're impulsive. We're constantly having emotions and feelings even in our body all the time that we're not aware of. And so I think part of my job as a therapist is to take a prompt and prompt the client to be aware of what just happened while they're going through this system that, again, intrinsically has some therapeutic value to it. So, for example, when it comes to, let's say, D&D narrative structure, and they're going through a mission or a quest, or they're, traversing through the Underdark, there are going to be times where they're going to have to find ways to communicate with each other, work together, problem solve, explore how to get around a trap, find ways to negotiate with NPCs in order to survive, unless they want to just go murder, go everything.
Just so we're clear, when
Throw
he says-
fireballs everywhere.
When he says negotiate, we also
so-
intimidate.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the aspects of growth that the players are going to engage in on their own, and then I go ahead and bring in the prompts either at the end of the session or even during a short rest or a long rest, and I can prompt them to think about and talk about, or at the very least be aware of some of these choices that they've made. And through awareness, then further therapeutic growth can happen, whether that's, again, at the end of the entire session, in sort of like the decompression stage, or even in individual therapy follow-ups, where we talk about what they did in their game. That's all intrinsic, and so those are the aspects that I'm looking for. Extrinsically, sometimes I will go ahead and take very specific therapeutic skills and build them into the narrative of the actual game through, these homebrew aspects. So, for instance, Tony being a cat monk, right? I could easily see one of my clients playing that kind of a character, and maybe I'd go over, in a pre-session, a skill of mindfulness, right? And how to practice mindfulness, or how to practice somatic awareness through stretching and just feeling your body and what it does to you emotionally. And what better character to play than a Tabaxi monk to practice those skills, and how could you integrate that into your narrative, into just a moment of getting ready for a long rest at the end of a real harrowing, scary day in the Underdark, and what that would do for the character, as well as what would it do for the player in the moment of actually practicing that in the session. So.
No, I like incorporating coping skills and mind-body awareness. And additionally, to say that, you don't come in ultimately knowing what people are going to want to work on, but you do know some things, some lagging skills that might need opportunities. People might not always be open to be talking about themselves, and there can be automatic defenses. This really does help in breaking down a barrier, because you don't, like I said, you don't really talk about yourself, you talk about your avatar, and it's more comfortable that way. And in kind of embodying challenges that they face, and see in those two separate worlds, that if my character can solve it, then I can solve it. And you can translate those skills, those feelings, to the player themselves. So, I say, it's like, have you ever tried to give your players a puzzle? And I read a post online, and they said, try this next time, any of my DMs in the audience. Give them a puzzle, whatever the puzzle is. The first time they try something, it doesn't work. The second time they try something, maybe give them a little hint. And then the third time they try something, regardless of what that answer is, just let it pass. And honestly, it feels so good, and sometimes the creative solutions that your players will come up to puzzles and problems are far more creative but more personal than what you could have ever made. The challenge isn't the DMs to give, it's the players to overcome. So otherwise, embodying those challenges is what we kind of need to do, those experiences that people want.
I'm just still hung up on that time that Adam was doing a really good job convincing people not to attack us. But that day in my real job, we had some meetings that could have just been emails. So I was suffering from Zoom fatigue. And then Adam's character was creating that Zoom fatigue feeling and being diplomatic. And I threw a fireball into them, assuming that it was all going to fall apart and we were going to fight them anyway. So I guess for me, what I'm thinking about is patience. So as a counselor, I'm always trying to ask my clients to consider what is a reasonable timeline for the big picture opportunity for growth that they came to talk with me about and meet me and work with me. And then what are some of the smaller steps, and how are we going to experience that process and make the steps serve the larger purpose. And some of the best things in life, we don't actually achieve them because we aren't willing to be bad at something long enough. And I remember wanting to be level 5 and get my fireball for a week, and then a month, and then a couple months. And then one day randomly Joe said, "You're level 5." And I was like, "I get a fireball?" And that was just a really nice feeling, even though arbitrarily Joe had the ability to, just let us do it whenever. But by waiting, I think that I became metaphorically what it is I'm always talking with people about. And that's good for us to be able to have empathy and experience things sometimes. So, the role-playing aspect is give yourself permission to be bad at this thing. Go to the gym and look ridiculous and work out if that's a goal that you have. But a lot of people let that goal fall to the wayside because they start to feel embarrassed or less confident. Or, if you want to read a book or you want to do public speaking or advance yourself into a different role at your job, give yourself small opportunities somewhere here and there. And the role-playing aspect in therapy can be an opportunity to practice in a less threatening setting. Also to be a different character sometimes lowers the stress level of actually practicing a new skill. Because, Tony can be good at what Tony's good at and bad at what Tony is bad at, but he always can just go to, I didn't even create this character in D&D.
Or I'm not getting heals.
Exactly, right? So built-in excuses that lower the risk of some kind of ego damage. I think that's what role-playing therapy kind of offers to anyone who's willing to take the advantage to be a version of you that is you, but only as far as you want it to be.
I'll also say, that actually reminds me also, even with clients that I see that, have particularly no interest in playing D&D or a tabletop game as part of therapy, or even outside of therapy. Like, I have clients who are just like, that's not my thing. Sometimes what I will do is I offer them just the experience of building a character. And that is a role-playing technique that I often use therapeutically, actually, with a lot of my clients, character building.
Okay, actually, well, how many enjoy the process of character building? Give me a thumbs up if that's a part. Okay. Very good. I knew where you're going with this.
Yeah, it is its own unique therapeutic process that really helps people discover all sorts of things about themselves. And not only do they discover and become aware of certain aspects of themselves, but then I can always use it as an anchoring point, a reference point of if we've created a character or two. It's like, all right, so you're having this difficult situation, in school and you're procrastinating. Like, what would, Bar the Barbarian do in this situation? That character that you created 2 months ago, right? And so, it allows people to really help bring aspects out about themselves that they sometimes, might be silent about in the first place.
Tony?
I'm what you call a Jungian Freudian analyst. So I basically bring everything from a concrete up into the abstract. So I work on an archetypal level with a lot of my clients. And so when we do these role play techniques, it's always like, all right, here's our character, let's build our character, we've created a concrete stuff, now let's bring it up into more of abstract. Why was this done? Why was this point here? Similar to like the life wheel and some levels is why did we choose to do some of this? Where is maybe our dark side, our shadow side coming out? Where are some of these other areas that are ripe for opportunity for growth for a lot of our clients, but also us as people? I mean, growth is never an ending thing. If you think you've grown as much as you can, I can tell you you're not. It's just not how it works. We're humans. We're supposed to grow until we perish. That's the point of living.
So I'm going to skip this question because I feel we've talked about applying therapy practices to role-playing. So I do want to open it up for questions. So if you have questions, we do have components, mics in the center. And as a reminder, we're looking for ask, not tell. So make sure you have a question within the first 2 or 3 prompts of your response. So we'd like to, please come up to the mic.
Hi. So my D&D group next week is about to do session 1 on Out of the Abyss. And we've already done a bunch of things as players, safety techniques, but I'm wondering how I, as a player, like if you have any advice on how I can help keep my DM safe, because she is using this as a way to reclaim the trauma narrative on her end.
There's a number of techniques, such as like the X card. There's the end scene one that's used in different RPG games. As much as the DM, as much as the players have the ability to say, I don't want to go there, the DM does as well. The DM can very easily utilize one of those ideas or be like, yeah, sure, that happened, and we just move right on. It's one of the big things that we tend to do.
Yeah, with this particular module on narrative, as I was saying, it's extremely challenging for a DM. There's so much to think about, so much to prepare for. It is a huge, prepare dump of a module. So a few things, as the DM that I've completely run this module completely through once. It took 1.5 years, and this is the second time I'm doing it with this group. A few things. One is to take some self-care time before and after. 2 is there are so many aspects of the narrative and NPCs that have their own backstories that if any of them seem to be triggering, I would suggest your DM, obviously read it through once, twice over, and pick out the parts that they don't want to include. To just totally drop some NPCs or modify them into a way that they think it's going to serve their own experience, for sure. But definitely the pre-self-care and the post-self-care, I think, is extremely important, especially after running this campaign. When I finish after 2-3 hours, I'm exhausted. So to have that self-care set up.
I would like to take credit for that because of my shenanigans.
Yeah.
That's all your fault. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for doing this panel. So these therapeutic role-playing techniques are most likely typically used with adolescents, teenagers, young adults and stuff like that. I work with the forensic population, so how different do you think these therapeutic role-playing techniques would be for a forensic population, those who have a very different type of trauma than many of us here, those who struggle with severe substance use, all that stuff? Do you think it would be different or not?
So I haven't worked with the forensic population, but we do have therapists on staff who have, and they have ran these types of things before. And it has to be very one-defined. We also incorporate other areas of activity, such as miniature painting, other ideas of character building. Where do you want your character to grow in certain situations? But it has to be a little bit more we're pretty free-flowing, I would like to say. Mm-hmm. There has to be a little bit more structure for the forensic population. I'm assuming you're talking about working in jails?
Yes, I work for the mental health court.
Yeah, so it's kind of one of those things that's making sure there's a structure, a little bit more of a heavier structure to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice.
So a bit of a two-parter. We know that the Underdark isn't the most fun place to be. So if your characters were to unfortunately pass, do you guys have any character ideas that you've got mulling around? We talked about the fun of character creation and stuff. And the other part, in aspect of character death, how do you really approach that in a therapeutic setting? If somebody's character was to hit 0, die, how do you sort of go about that? Because I'm sure some people wouldn't really take it as well.
I don't know, Joe. You've almost killed me 3 times now.
Yeah. This is besides my own homebrews or Tomb of Annihilation. This definitely is one of the modules that put the players' characters' lives in the most risk almost every turn. From a therapeutic standpoint, I think a couple of things. One is to let the players, talk out and role play out like what has happened to their character's emotion for losing a party member. Honestly, I've run groups where, there isn't much talk about it, but the loss is felt and comes up later in later sessions where the group will even have like recalled stories about that character, and the player that was lost. Other times I've had people really grieve and get extremely upset and explore what a burial would look like, or have actual sessions of emotional conversations about loss and grief. In terms of you guys go for what character ideas are floating around, but also
I almost died last session.
Yeah, everyone almost died last session. It was a really rough session.
But for me, it was the first time that I almost died.
Yep.
Right? You never forget your first time, Joe. So I had to roll my death saves, and I was successful. And then Sylvan came and administered medicine, or maybe it was
Wait a
Patrick.
minute. You said I heal people? Are you sure?
Yeah. So Adam and Shane both
Thank
made
you.
sure I didn't die, so I'm fine now. But I was really thinking about what happens if this character dies. Like, am I done? They're going to ask me to roll a different character. Do I want to be a different character? Can I authentically be a different character? I'm a wizard. Can I just be called in the white? And maybe show up in a month after a hiatus in some Underdark forest that's even more terrifying than...
I mean, I figured you'd just be a lich.
Yeah, you're kind of...
I don't even know what options are possible if I die, but I think that I was experiencing a lot of the questions I think that your question is prompted by is that opportunity to think about how fragile we are. I mean, I had 18 HP just one roll ago, and now I'm like almost gone. Some people get less time to reflect on that. I think that therapeutically that is an interesting question to see how people structure their own psyche around the idea of being alive and what their goals are. And these are things that I would not have reflected on that Friday without the D&D game. So it's a very real thing, and hopefully everything I described from my perspective is not threatening sounding. Some people may feel more threatened by that when the thing that prompts it is not D&D. So, I just think that those would be an interesting set of questions to answer, and each person's going to answer it very personally.
Yeah. I'll just to quickly throw this out here. It triggered my memory. One of the most prominent, I think, therapeutic ways that a group of mine handled the character's death is, remember, a lot of these characters might have backstories and families and friends that are not there on the adventure. And so the group wrote a letter to the passed away character's family to be sent there. And the content not only was therapeutic for the rest of the group, but for the player whose character had died to hear what the rest of the group thought of them and send it back to their family that was waiting.
So unfortunately, that is all the time left questions for, because we got about 5 minutes left. I do want to give the panelists one final chance to give a piece of wisdom before going. So let me start with Joe first.
As a DM or GM, I would say wisdom.
I know. What is one thing that you feel that the audience should know after hearing what we've been talking about for the last 55 minutes? That didn't help at all.
Yeah, no. Be observant, I think, is a very important skill of a DM or GM. To be observant of your players and how they're reacting. Don't get too caught up in the narrative of your own story that you want to tell. Be observant.
I have one piece of advice for DMs and one piece of advice for players. For the forever players out there, remember, respect your DM, respect their decisions. They make a call, you know, that's how it lands, right? For DMs, remember, your players are smarter than you. They will come up with a solution you have never thought of, heard of. They might kill the boss in the first 15 minutes of walking into the town and your entire plan is shot for the day. But when you think about it, maybe it's better that way. Maybe that's how things are supposed to play out. Accepting that and moving on. So trust your players, trust your DMs, and just try to have fun.
Fun is so important to what we do in life, and it often offers us a path to the things we actually want to feel more often than the mundane options that we limit ourselves to. So my recommendation is let creativity and fun and imagination be a part of who you are, and if a game like this or something similar can give you a moment to feel fulfilled, learn how you grow, learn what's valuable about the way that you see yourself in the context of your life, just enjoy that and let it happen. I only knew Tony a year ago from this day. The other three on the panel I met because of this game, and if you know, I've done group therapy with people for years. If anybody feels that kind of closeness and importance in relationships with people they sit shoulder to shoulder with, then I've done my job. But we did this with a game, and this is the first physical table we've actually all sat at. So Roll20 also gave us a lot, and Zoom and Twitch and everything that we have running when we play has actually been the glue for our friendships to begin, grow, and develop over the last almost year. So just let those things be a part of your experience.
I would probably say mine is probably, if you can think it, it can happen. We've done combo moves against Joe. We have done things that he's like, I don't even know how you got this. And we're like, we're gonna just do it. We're gonna try it out. I mean, if Danny was up here,
Oh man, he is so missing.
I know, he's so missing this one. But the biggest thing is don't be hindered by what you think you can and cannot do. You're in a game. You can do anything. That's the part. If your rolls are high enough, you can do it, even if they're not. Sometimes the DM lets us do some fun stuff just because he wants to see what's going to happen.
And I think the one that I would leave is try to push beyond yourself. Basically, because you're dealing with the mind space of role-playing, feel that you can do more than you would do in the real world. Try to challenge yourself and push yourself. So, with that in mind, let's push our hands together and thank the wonderful panelists. Before we go, two things. One is, if you notice the bear that's been in front of you the entire time, that's part of an High Northern pack. If you go to my Twitter and type in SILMAN, if you retweet that, you have a chance to win this. And the other thing, because my panelists have been absolutely wonderful, I will do a little bit of self-promotion since they've been doing most of the talking. My book is coming out as a ebook on the 1st. If you want to scan that QR code, I'll get you there. That is what the cover looks like. So feel free to do it. I would like to see it move to the top 10 of clinical psychology on Amazon. So if you help me out, I'd greatly appreciate it. And with that, on behalf of my wonderful panelists, myself and Roscoe the cat, have a wonderful day.